Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Professional Auctioneers, otherwise known as LAPA. I wanted to take just a moment to have a brief prelude to this hearing highlights that you're about to see, entailing the deceased auctioneer and the hearing that was held for him. Yes, we have received the speculation that all of this was done as a favor for a state senator's son, namely Brant Thompson. As many of you are aware, Brant Thompson was a key figure in the trial of Murphy Painter, a gentleman that used to head the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. Mr. Thompson played the key role, if you will, of when the Inspector General's office came in and did their raid on the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. Mr. Thompson said that Mr. Painter was out of control. He had a couple other adjectives he used to describe him. But here's the key thing. When it went to trial on it, it was laughed out of the courtroom. It was an utter embarrassment. Not only for the U.S. Attorney's Office, but especially for the Office of Inspector General. I mean, an utter embarrassment what they actually presented in there. I don't know how the jury took 6 hours to deliberate it. It was an embarrassment to be prosecuting a man for such things as sending sympathy cards. I mean, that's literally, I'm not making that up. That's literally what that trial entailed. Now, Brant Thompson happens to be the son of State Senator Francis Thompson. I don't know whether the board bent over backwards in facilitating this request and assisting in filing of a bond claim to assist Senator Thompson's son. I don't know. I also don't know in terms of the other speculation that we've received from auctioneers in terms of, well, the auctioneer from New York that was referenced in that hearing, and did he come down? Was he not paired up with another auctioneer in this state that's had some problems in the past, and they too had a splitting of the seams, and therefore he joined forces with Terry Shirley at the auction, at the board meeting not too long back, I don't know, January or so, when the gentleman applied for an apprentice license under Mr. Shirley. I don't know the answers to any of that. And it's really irrelevant because any of the auctioneers that have been referenced by name here, they have licenses. So, in terms of whether a favor was done for Senator Francis Thompson's son regarding the hearing you're about to watch, I don't know. So, with that, I'll let you go ahead and see how the LALB had no qualms going after a dead auctioneer. An auctioneer no longer able to defend himself. And boy, did they throw the book at him. Oh, it takes a lot of guts, a lot of gumption to go after a dead auctioneer, help you out filing this bond claim. Enjoy the video, folks. Thank you very much.
David Braken, by way of background.
Yes.
Okay. Again, I'm Douglas Riggers, representing Jane Miller. Mr. Miller is deceased. He held his last auction on March 22nd, 2012. 2 days later, he died in heart attack. Matters were left somewhat in disarray, but Mr. Massey, who was a trusted longtime friend, did best he could. Everything was thrown somewhat in chaos, unfortunately. There might have been some confusion over where things ended up at that point. Ms. Miller was appointed independent administratrix on June 13, 2012, 3 months later. It's unknown what happened to the goods that were being issued. Perhaps they were commingled with some other goods. Perhaps they were inadvertently destroyed. Perhaps they were stolen by someone. Mr. Massey kept a watchful eye out for the business, but beyond that, things can happen. And the complaint being brought 4 years now, 2.5 years later, it's very difficult to reconstruct what happened. It's very difficult to put a value on what things are. That would be one of the issues before the board if you determine that there were goods that where Mr. Thompson should be compensated for. And the second issue would be shared responsibility. After such a long period of time, it does not seem fair to fully assess the bonding company or the respond in this matter for matters that were beyond anybody's control and where better information to resolve this would have been available at an earlier time. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, would you come forward? identify yourself for the record.
Brant Thompson.
And
Here, so, and that complaint is dated April 21st of 2013, which was more than a year ago.
okay. And could you explain to the board exactly your position in this issue?
Well, I had a business relationship with Mr. Bruce Miller. I engaged Mr. Miller to market some antique items of antiques that I had accumulated and invested in over the course of a few years. I don't recall the sheer numbers, but it was a container size, probably 20 by 7 by 7, full of merchandise. Mr. Miller agreed to market that at the auction on Walker South Road. At some point prior to Mr. Miller's death, he and I had a conversation where he explained to me that he was planning a very large auction that he expected to be well attended. As I understand, there were items being shipped to his auction house from somewhere in the northeast part of the country, and that he had just held an auction at his place where he did, in fact, market a few of my items, but he felt that that they would bring a higher price if he were to withhold those for a period of time and introduce those with the items that were to be trucked in to Walker. And I understand that shortly after that period, Mr. Miller did, in fact, be an untimely death. It's my understanding through conversations with Mr. Joe Massey, who was very gracious in assisting me and was actually the one who notified me of Mr. Miller's death. He had attempted to help me identify where some of the items may have ended up. He made a few suggestions about locations we might check. We actually did a walkthrough at the facility, and Mr. Massey indicated that I shared with him the list of items and described, which is very general, but I described the contents of the items the content of the items I brought, and he indicated that he recalled those items actually being sold at that auction, or at least some of those items. And unfortunately, we were never able to recover any proceeds whatsoever, or locate any of the items that I delivered to Mr. Miller's auction house. And it was actually Mr. Massey who suggested to me that I avail myself of this process in order to attempt to recover for my loss through. He informed me that Mr. Bruce Miller was in fact a licensed auctioneer and bonded and whatnot. And although I have a very limited understanding of the auction business, it was my understanding that the bond is in place for that purpose. I learned through the investigation, which Mr. Steele was involved in for some time, and I certainly appreciate his efforts in his investigation, but that in fact Mr. Miller was properly bonded as a licensed auctioneer, and that in fact he had not maintained an escrow account that is required as part of his license. So that's what brings me here, and I'd certainly like to respond to the gentleman's comments that that the complaint was not timely filed. I want to make sure that he understands that in fact I did file a complaint some time ago, and we're just making it here. It's been a very long time for me as well.
All right, and let me say this. Obviously, you have 3 years on the statute called the auctioneer, so that, and I understand where it's going to go too. Attached to the complaint I presented to you is a copy of consignment contract. Are you the signatory on that contract?
Yes, ma'am.
And
as
this
well
is,
as there's a signature of Mr. Bruce Miller, and as I recall, Mr. Miller's wife was actually the individual who recorded the information on the lines.
Okay, so-
And we unloaded.
so you did not write those, Mrs. Miller wrote those to your memory?
Yes, ma'am, the description of the items, that is correct.
Based on his testimony, and I believe you have a copy of this complaint, Mr. Gregory, you would often introduce this complaint to the attached contract as Board Exhibit 1.
Is there any objection?
I would like to respond to you things at some point.
Well, I'm gonna let you continue pause.
I have a question, because mine is not legible. What was the value of the amount of the items on the sign? So I cannot read my copy.
Well, there's not a value associated with it, ma'am.
What is your best guesstimate or estimate of the value?
I would have hoped to realize $4,000 to $5,000 for the item.
And it was a 25% commission.
Yes, ma'am. I think that's
And you
right.
didn't realize anything?
Zero.
And you do realize that as an auctioneer licensed in Louisiana, he had a $10,000 bond in his back.
Ma'am, sorry.
He had a $10,000 bond in his back.
I'm not familiar with the intricate details of the licensing process for auctioneers, but I do understand that there is a bond in place, and the purpose of that is to protect folks such as myself.
Right, did you ever make a claim against his succession for the amount?
No, ma'am.
You have not
I
made any?
simply filed this complaint and then waited.
There's no
to
complaint in
the
succession.
process.
Okay.
So independently, you have no knowledge of the location of the items, where they were sold, or whether there was any money received by Mr. Miller?
No, ma'am, other than, again, the hearsay information from Mr. Massey, who was very confident that my items in fact sold at a large antique auction. When he took the items in, there was a scheduled auction that he held at that location, because he and I had a conversation after that auction where he said he did in fact sell a few items, but he made a decision based on the crowd that he would withhold the items and mix them in with the items that were anticipated to come down from some location up in the Northeast. I don't know if it was New Jersey, New York, but he explained to me that a gentleman was coming with a tractor trailer rig, at least one, and with some very fine antiques, and he anticipated a very large crowd.
And you did not attend either the first auction or the second?
I've never been to one of the auctions.
The value of the items on your list, did you acquire those through purchase yourself?
Yes, sir.
None of it was inherited?
No, sir.
Are you a dealer in antiques?
No, sir, I'm not.
How did you come to buy them? Did you to the auction houses, or did you purchase for friends? Or how?
My wife and I often, we have two very young children now, so we don't do it very often. But
Antiques
we
are
would,
small children. I don't see.
we would,
Seems dangerous to me.
We would, we have two brand new babies. We would go to Denham Springs and various other places and antique auctions, and I've always had an interest in antiques. My home is decorated with antiques, and I always felt that it was a pretty good investment, even from when I was, probably in high school. I never minded spending money for antique items, because I always felt that you could at least get your money, your return from that. So they were picked up over many years.
And Mr. Thompson, did you and your wife keep a record or a log of your purchases, the amounts and the dates?
No, sir. I suspect that I have some records regarding, in fact, I know that I do on some of my more expensive items, but certainly not on all of these items.
On this, are you aware of the fact that this auction house really does not deal in what you might call Royal Street, New Orleans antiques?
I have knowledge that based on my conversations with Mr. Miller, in fact, they were extensively involved in marketing antiques, and again, it was my understanding that they actually shipped antiques, fine antiques, from the northeast to be sold at auction in Walker. And I know there are other auction houses in Walker that are engaged in the similar business.
I'd like to draw your attention again to the amounts of things on this last recorded sale. $2,807.25 worth of merchant payments were made to sellers.
Yes, sir.
And if you total the number of items, you'll come up with 156 items. So, giving pluses and minuses, the average item value sold on that night was $18. That's really not very high end.
No, sir. And I have no idea what was sold at this particular auction.
And are there any items on your list that could really, antiques are in the eye of the beholder, and so value. Some things have great value to people because it fits with their decor in their house, or they like a period style, or the colors, or perhaps like some history from it. Is there anything on these items here that would be other than for someone else to just come in and take a look and say these are basically nice household things?
I'm not sure that I understand.
I'm saying, why would they come in and think that these necessarily are antiques?
Are you asking me what?
I'm looking for something to make me feel that they're other than just household things that normal people have rather than collectors.
Well, only for me telling you that they were antiques. There were a number of primitive items that would date back into the 1700s, 1800s, some turn of the century stuff, and again some newer things. But
Are you able to take that list and identify which items really would have more than the apparent value of for example, they folding chairs? I'm sure there are antique folding chairs, but we have nothing to go on to know that it's other than just some folding chairs that were excess.
yes, sir. And I think you said it best. It's
Carback.
in the eye of the beholder.
Box of blankets, box of glass, box of kitchen miscellaneous, box of posters miscellaneous, 2 direct TV dishes, 1 box of household electronics, 2 doors white, Christmas tree stand, box of rugs, box of linens, blankets, box of clothing, 2 sets of folding chairs. Now, the antique bed's kind of interesting there. Can you tell me something about that? The iron bed?
An antique iron bed.
Can you describe it a little bit more further?
It was a relatively heavy material and somewhat ornate, but
Was it a twin bed?
it was a full
bed?
It's pretty typical with antique beds.
Antique toaster? Can you describe that, please, sir?
It's obviously metal. It's made of a relatively shiny metal. The elements are contained in the center, and there are little doorways, so to speak, that are ventilated that open out. The toast is placed in and they collapse in. It sits in somewhat of a trapezoid shape,
like
maybe,
teepee? Okay.
something like that.
That's kind of interesting. But how about the child's potty seat here?
It's an antique.
It's antique too.
Yes, sir. I actually
Counsel,
have-
this board,
Actually,
I don't think is empowered to place a value on any of this. That would be up to the bonding company or the succession.
I did not realize that.
I mean, the only thing that we can say is, does he have a right to collect it, and whether or not any rules have been violated, not whether or not he's put the proper value on any of these amounts. We have no way of knowing that. We don't have pictures of it. We also have a dead auctioneer. So we have no way to controvert any testimony.
We're all,
As I
every
see
person goes in
it,
and
he's
just.
got a right to make a claim against the bond or the succession. If the succession is insolvent and the wife has not closed it nor accepted it, I think the succession is out and he doesn't know. And you don't know the answer to that question. But the auctioneer, to my knowledge, did have a bond in effect at the time. Is that correct? As far as I know, yes. So you make a claim against the bonding company, and it's up to them to say what proof he has to come up with as to the amounts of these items.
So, Mr. Thompson, would you dispute it if I said this? It looks like you delivered goods to the auction house. There's no record they were sold. There's also no record you either received your goods back or compensated.
I would only say for the record that I delivered items to Mr. Bruce Miller for sale at his auction house. I've never received any compensation whatsoever for the sale of those items, and I can only speak to the sale based on conversation with Mr. Miller, who indicated to me that he had offered a few items for sale. But again, after gauging the crowd at that particular auction, he made a decision to withhold the antiques to mix in with the stuff that I understand will be coming from New Jersey, New York, or somewhere in the Northeast. Don't know whether that was any truth to that or not, but that's what I was
I
told.
think it may have been Mr. Miller was starting to feel his ill health, and that may have affected.
That's irrelevant to us. It's irrelevant to you. It's also speculative.
Okay.
Would you like to?
So I think that just moving forward with this, it's if we take action to say, yes, this is a bonding company issue, and that's what the ruling should be coming out of here, I think that you would agree there's something owed to him, and it's a very unfortunate situation.
I would just think that the amounts, the marketability of these items has not been, I can't testify to this. I say,
Just go ahead and stay
Okay,
there.
okay. The marketability of these items is an open question.
But
That's
that's
the
between
only
him and the
question.
bonding company, not us.
That's,
We don't
my
see
client's
him-
concerned with the amount that might be
But
claimed.
then if it goes against the bonding company, then he's got to make a claim and support that claim with the bonding company, not with this commission.
So in that sense, I'm not adverse to Mr. Thompson.
He
having
should make a claim
before the
fast.
board.
If he hadn't done, we haven't done it within 3 years.
He can't make a claim.
Okay.
We have to make a
That's why
claim,
we
yeah,
check
okay,
records.
okay, yeah. You have a short period of time to make it, it's 3 years, isn't
Ms. Miller's concern is the amount of claim that might be
it? All we can do is
lodged
to make a
against.
claim. I find probable cause to make a claim, and that's, I think, all the board can do.
No, you don't do that.
Okay.
No, we have to make a finding of a disciplinary action, this is you always. The fact he's deceased is not going to make any difference. The question is, he was alive when these events occurred. So you have to make a determination. Only, don't worry about probable cause in the bond or what the bond will do. The board must make a decision as to whether it's a violation of the statute. And I don't want to get sidetracked, so we'll be here all day talking about this and other things that are not necessarily wrong.
I'll have to object that any violation occurred during the time of his license. Because what happened to the goods may well have happened after the last auction, followed almost immediately by his heart attack and death.
But wasn't he his company and he the custodian of those items? They were placed in his guard.
I'm not sure what that's.
So he is responsible.
That-
But
well-
he cannot be responsible for something he didn't do wrong.
But he, wait. He did have, and Mr. Thompson has testified, that he sold items at a sale prior to this last sale.
But that's unconfirmed. I have nothing to confirm that anything was sold before.
All right, I have a question of the attorney, but he had the guard. In other words, he had the merchandising responsibility to keep those items. Is that correct? They were in his control and custody, not his.
That's not what she
I
said.
have a witness that will address that specifically.
But what the other counsel said was that he had violated the terms of his licensure. And he had not violated the terms of his licensure based on the evidence before this board.
Well, that's what the
That's what we
board
have to
is
decide.
going to hear all the evidence as to what happened, and then they'll make a finding of fact as to what actually happened, based on what they hear.
I just wanted to know if you had an escrow. You know?
Not that I know.
So you don't know if all the regulations
I-
or not?
No, I can't testify. on that.
Okay, so you just
That
said
was
that
a
you followed all the
violation.
I
regulations?
have no idea.
That's a violation.
Okay, so you don't know. if you
I just don't
followed
know.
the
I just don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Biggest deficiency that I could find with regard to how this would have impacted the investigation is that there were no bidder's tickets, no way that I could find out which item by item was sold. All I have is the items that were consigned by the other consigners. There's no indication that Mr. Thompson was a consigner of this auction whatsoever. Now, keep in mind, this is the auction immediately prior to Mr. Miller's death. She said there may have been some records of prior auctions, but she couldn't find them. She couldn't provide it to me. Just as far as the board's decision, one of the things that may be important to you is she provided no evidence of any type of escrow account whatsoever. In fact, she had no idea whether he had one or not. It was her opinion that he did not.
You physically view the location of the auction to determine whether you could locate any of Mr. Thompson's items?
I went out there and I spoke to Mr. Massey. We did not go through it. One of the difficulties in here is when you look at the descriptions from Mr. Thompson, he knows his items. You know, he would know what a two-folded chair would look like. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily know that any particular two-folded chairs were his. But, so no, I did not do a walkthrough to see if I could find all that.
Do you believe Mr. Thompson, however, when he tells you he did a walkthrough in that location?
I do, because Mr. Massey confirmed that.
Now, Mr. Massey had access to this material. Do you know why?
He lives on that property. He was in business once upon a time with Mr. Miller.
But it's your knowledge that they were no longer in business at the time of the sale?
According to Mr. Massey's statement, they were not. And based on what I could see from the Secretary of State's office, it looks like all of the auction businesses that they were involved in had their charters revoked, the latest of which was May 21st of 2010.
See that there was no escrow account. There was a question as to what happened to the furniture. We don't know, even at the time of the sale, whether that furniture was still on the location. Mr. Thompson has never been given accounting, although other consigners were paid, and he has not been able to locate the property that was consigned to this particular auctioneer. I know that he's deceased, and you can take that into consideration, and he technically violated the statutes which required him to both account for the property consigned or to pay for it within a certain period of time. Further, you will see that there was some breakdown with regard to this property, which apparently, like a better term, walked off, and no one knows what happened to it. Whether that happened prior to his death or after his death, we do not know. And we have no record substantiating on it.
Yes, thanks for hearing me. There's no indication that the goods were ever misappropriated, sold without remitting funds, or that anything fell the goods prior to Mr. Miller's death. It would appear that it's equally likely and perhaps more certain that anything that happened to those items that were entrusted to the auction house, something untoward happened after Mr. Miller's death.
I think that we have. I think we've made a decision that even though the auctioneer is deceased, he violated his escrow accounting agreement and his consignments, and he still has his guard of his property. And I find that he is certainly in violation of the rules of being an auctioneer.
Discussion. Although we find him in violation, we're not going to find the estate.
Well, we can't find his estate because it's the property.
And let me say
He
this.
has the right to go against the bond.
Obviously, we could make a fine and fine against the business. That's up to the board. Because he, as a Louisiana resident auctioneer, had his business also closed. However, I'm not necessarily asking for that at this point. However, I do want you to be clear about the finding, because we had to talk about that, is that I understand that the finding is, as you stated, that he failed to have an escrow account. Are you also finding that he failed to maintain the property or pay?
No record keeping on the consignment, and no reconciliation of the goods that were brought to him.
Okay.
And he failed to keep a record.
A record.
Yeah, I want to make sure we have everything
Because
listed.
they're gonna need that on there for.
I understand that the
That needs to be on
business is no
motion.
longer in operation, is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Because he's no longer
Right,
operational.
because he's the
So
auctioneer.
you'll write it up with him.
She actually worked
That's
it.
it, okay.
All right,
Well, then I'll look
Well,
at it.
Yes, I
Okay.
want you to look at to make sure we have all of the violations in there correctly.
All in favor, it's poll. We have the motion, everyone accept, understands the motion, and the second. Send poll.
Mr. Brister?
Yes.
Ms. Jacobs?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Ms. Stankin?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
I second.